Hello. How's everybody doing? Welcome to our Sunday live stream where we try to talk about things other than wrestling because we talk about wrestling pretty much every day. So this is basically going to be about you guys. What are you guys watching or reading that you might find interesting, that you think that I might find interesting? Get you an idea to pitch some stuff for me to watch because I run out of stuff to watch. I got tons of comic books because Free Comic Book Day was recent. And so I got a ton of comic books to read. But I haven't watched a movie in forever. Um, haven't watched a TV show in a long time either. So I know people have told me to watch Godzilla. I haven't gotten around to watching that yet. I will eventually. I will get around to watching Godzilla. Well, I think it's called Godzilla Minus. I will get around to watching that. But other than that, I've been spending most of my time reading manga and comic books, trying to clear off you know, my stack of things that I'm behind on. I tried watching Ninja Kamui, which was uh, it's like an anime type show. It used to come on Adult Swim. I'm almost through with it, but it's kind of boring. Like it's hard for you to make ninjas boring, but they're doing a good job. You know, it's just not interesting. I don't know why. It's just coming across like maybe it's the revenge element of it, and you know they did the old Eastern Promises type of story where the guy goes off and he's hiding, and you know people find him and they kill his family, and now he's got to go and get revenge. It's like, yeah, that's nice, but mm, it feels like that's been done 100 times, and I'm trying to figure out how to try to find something different. But I'm still scrolling through things, looking for something to watch, looking for something to talk about, and I haven't gotten anything yet. I've heard a lot though. I've heard about a lot of things. So, but what about is anybody here? As a matter of fact, 'cause I don't see anybody. Nobody's made a comment yet. But uh, so I guess I'll talk about my big pickup from Free Comic Book Day. I spent almost $120. I only go to the comic book shop once a month now, just to pick up all of my issues and different things. And Free Comic Book Day was there, so I was able to get some comics. I didn't get anything that was too dirt cheap, but I did get something that I had been looking for a long time, and that is the Jason Aaron, Assad Rubik, Thor, the Saga of Gore the God Butcher. This is issues 1 through 11 of Jason Aaron's Thor. I love this. I remember reading it online when it came out, and I really thought it was fantastic. I didn't want to pay full price for the graphic novel. Thankfully, they had a slightly damaged version that has a torn page in the back that they taped up, and they sold it to me for $10. So since I'm a reader and not really a collector, and it's a graphic novel anyway, I know that Alan Moore has his issues with the term graphic novel, but that's what we're calling it. I picked it up, and I'm really enjoying it. So I got that. I got Parasite number 6. I got Helsing number 6, which I haven't read yet. I have the comic book history of professional wrestling, which is a book from Aubrey Sitterson. Aubrey Sitterson, for those of you who don't know, is a dork comic book writer who wrote G.I. Joe several years ago and absolutely crashed the franchise. So they crashed the franchise so badly, the IDW is lost it to to Skybound. But he was the guy who wrote G.I. Joe with no guns because he hated guns. And then started adding like fat women to the team because he thought it needed to be more diverse. Well, it turns out that this Aubrey Citizen is a big fan of Dragon Ball, and he wrote a comic book that kind of is is an ode to Dragon Ball. And he now has also written a comic book that is a history of professional wrestling. And since this was only like $7, I went and picked that up too. And we will be talking about that once I read it, but I haven't read it yet. Um, I have the IDW Alopex Biggie. The one shot is a collection of Alopex stories from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that came out recently. I thought that was pretty good. I haven't read it yet. I have Record of Ragnarok 10, which I have finished. I thought it was excellent. Record of Ragnarok is one of these things that had a really great start, which means a lot of people was into it when it first started, but which happens a lot with manga. It start out with a bang, everybody's reading it, everybody's talking about it, but as it goes on, other things start and people lose interest. They don't follow it from issue to issue or from volume to volume. And I think because it takes so long for these volumes to come out now that people tend to forget about them. Which if I was, reading it weekly, I probably wouldn't forget. I probably would forget to read it weekly, but getting them these volumes has been pretty good. The For those of you who don't understand Record of Ragnarok, it's a simple tournament between gods and humans. And the idea being is that the gods want to destroy all of humanity, but they wanted to give them a fighting chance. So they, decided to challenge them into a one-on-one tournament. And if the humans win more of the matches, then they get to survive. And then there's Valkyries, which are not godlike creatures, but they have like special powers, and they're typically immortal, but they're not gods. And they're sort of betraying the gods and helping them by creating weapons called Volund, which is, the Valkyries are turning themselves into weapons so that the humans can fight on an equal playing field with the gods. And it's created quite a few very interesting scenarios and some really good stories that they've been telling in here. So number 10 has been about Raiden Tamemon, and I don't want to, I think it's Shiva, the god of destruction. Yeah, Shiva, the god of destruction from India. And it was a really, really good fight. I mean, they've been fighting the last the last two volumes. So we're getting closer and closer to the tournament being over, but this has been pretty good. From the comic book show that I went to a couple weeks back, I picked up a G.I. Joe Storm Shadow uh, graphic novel. It's Storm Shadow Volume 1. Storm Shadow is a very, very good character. He's not always a villain. This wasn't very great. It was written by Larry Hama, and it was drawn by Mark Robinson and David Hueso. It was okay. It wasn't great, but it was all right. Um, it was okay. I got it for $2, so I didn't lose any sleep over that. Um, and I think that's pretty much it. I read, the finish of Blade, the Blade series from Marvel. I read the end of that. I got the free comic book day version of Conan the Barbarian, which was amazing. Free Conan um, comic, the most recent one, I believe it was 10, written by Jim Zub. I don't remember. It was very good. Um, I put it in the sleeve already, and I lost it. Um, I read the free comic book day Teenage Mutant Turtles, which was about the Night Watcher, which I think is Raphael. But that's okay. It was okay too. That was only half the story. The other half was like a real children's version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so I think it's okay. Um, they also had a One Piece comic that was for free comic book day, so I got to read a little bit of One Piece about the guy eating a devil fruit and getting firepower and all that kind of stuff. I never really got into One Piece. Um, that wasn't going to make me read One Piece. I just wanted to be more familiar with it, so that wasn't going to change my mind any. But that Street Fighter versus Final Fight free comic book day thing was tremendous. That was legit. That thing's legit. If you can get your hands on that, I highly suggest you. it was free, and for a free book, it was fun. It was mostly Final Fight. It told the story of Cody of Final Fight, turning himself into a vigilante, going around beating up folks, and the Street Fighter characters was, Chun Li and Guile, who are, you know, police officers, even though Guile was in the military. Like, I don't. Why does he care about what Cody is doing? In any event, uh, they arrested him, put him in jail, and all this kind of stuff. It was fun. It was really fun. I just read so much stuff that I'm having trouble remembering it all. But I got Chain Soldier, what they call, slave soldier in Japan. But Chain Soldier #7 uh, is getting more interesting. There's a lot of boobs in that joint, though. There's a lot of boobs in this series, period. Um, Grace Rosa, Grace Rosa, great manga. Didn't really care for the ending. Thought the ending was kind of weak, but I like the series overall. Grace Rosa is a story about a young woman whose life was saved by, a man named Rogan, who was an elite assassin working for an organization called Alterna, and he all of a sudden disappears, and she goes searching for him, and then to do so, she joins the organization in order to find him, and it's a one shot, so it's only one volume, but is the reason why I liked it so much. You tell the entire story in one shot. But unfortunately, I was not a huge fan of the way they concluded the series. Wasn't a huge fan of how they concluded the series. But it seemed like it might be another volume to it. I don't know. We'll see. Um, what else? Still got 100 bullets, which is, but this is one of, I still haven't read this. It's a big volume. It is 1 through 19 issues, 1 through 19 of 100 bullets. Still haven't read it. Still have my massive Usagi Yojimbo volume 2 to read. Um, so I got so much stuff, and in order to not, overwhelm myself, I only go to the comic book shop once a month rather. So at the beginning, the first pay week of the month, I go to the comic book shop and drop like $100 on some stuff. I also got a collection of Typhoid Mary comics, in the Daredevil Typhoid's Kiss volumes. Even though it says Daredevil Typhoid's Kiss, Daredevil does not appear. It's mostly Typhoid Mary mixed up with Wolverine and Ghost Rider and a bunch of other stuff from the 90s. It's written by Ann Nocenti and various artists. I like Typhoid Mary, and I think as a character, she's underutilized. Most recently, I saw Typhoid Mary in, I believe it was the Black, White, and Red for Elektra, where they tell the story of Elektra and Typhoid Mary essentially being in the insane asylum at the same time, where they know each other from their time in the insane asylum. Because Mary is technically crazy. She's actually from the same program that created Wolverine, so the Weapon X program. But they she has like multiple personalities, much like Moon Knight. She's Moon Knight except for, female and villainous and highly sexual in some instance. But I love Typhoid Mary. I think that she is very underutilized as a character. But I don't read Marvel a lot, so I think the only thing in Marvel I've been reading is Moon Knight and Blade. I haven't finished Moon Knight yet, even though they spoiled me and told me the Moon Knight was dead and they created a new one. But the Jed McKay Moon Knight, I have the first 2 volumes. I'm going to get the last 2. Probably going to get them all in stock trades. And I may set that up because I know it takes in stock trades forever to send shit. So if I order something tomorrow, then that shit ain't coming until like July. It probably won't show up till July or something like that. That's just kind of how in stock trades get down. Also, I've been trying to read Dragon Ball. I've been getting the 3-in-1s. I got the first 3 volumes. I can't find volume 4. I've been trying to wait for Amazon to stock up on volume 4, but uh, they suck for that. I think as soon as Toriyama died, they decided, you know what, we're not gonna go. We're gonna sell only the Viz Bigs. And I'm like, no, because all the comic book shops that used to have the 3-in-1s, they disappeared. Like they started pushing us towards the bigs. Oh, people are starting to come in. Good. Um, my series Momo the Blood Taker is supposed to be ending soon on volume 9, which is supposed to be either this month or next month. I'm not entirely sure when. Oh yeah, I bought Dread versus Death, which is the Judge Dredd Essential Judge Dredd collection that features stories from Judge Death, Judge Fear. What was this Judge? The one with the fire head. I forget what he was called, and the one with the mask was Judge Fear. But I love these Judge Dredd stories are supposed to be satire, but I never got satire from them. They always seem very straightforward. As you know, Judge Dredd is fighting mutants and demons and stuff, but Dread versus Death is tremendous. Um, the Apocalypse War, Judgment Day, all those essentials of Judge Dredd, I highly recommend all of those. Also, the Judge Anderson Shambhala, I had fun with that too. So if it's a Judge Dredd essential and I've read it, I've enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. So um, I like the Judge Dredd joints. I would not order them from the website though, because they're coming from the UK and whew, they kick you in the ass on on delivery from the UK. So if you can't find it in a store, don't worry about it. Order it from Amazon or something. I read Sandland from Akira Toriyama. I did manage to find that. Uh, it had a deep discount right when Toriyama died, so I read Sandland. It's good. Um, I thought it would be better, but it's good. It's an interesting story. Very short though. It's only 1 volume. So let's see what you guys are talking about. Black Sand 97 says, "Have I ever read or watched Baki?" I assume you mean Baki the Grappler. I did. I watched the up to the point where they had all the prisoners escape and Baki was going around wrestling them to death. I thought that was good. I wanted to steal that plot actually for my stories. I was like, that's a really cool fucking story. Imagine, you put that in a different context. That could be badass. Um, I watched quite a bit of Baki the Grappler actually. I don't like the art style though. His dad was an asshole. I remember his dad kicking his ass. But other than that, mm, I don't know how much more there is to it. I know it's a long series, but I'm certainly not reading it. But I did watch it. I watched it up. I think I watched it up to the point where they capture all of those guys. And but I'll have to. I don't know. But it's one of those things where I don't really care for the art style, so I didn't give it my all and pay attention to it too much. But I am very interested. I've been trying to watch the old GI Joe cartoons too. Um, Sometimes I just go to the YouTube channel and punch in and just watch whatever GI Joe episodes show up because it's easy to do, you know. But I don't know which Baki the Grappler, if I were to watch it, what to watch. But whatever. Timu Asaikainen says, "What am I watching? Well, not Raw, SmackDown, or Dynamite. I can tell you that." Ha! uh, uh, you know what? That's an interesting thing because I was going to make. There was an article on NoDQ.com that is in reference to why people shouldn't watch those shows. And that means like the weekly wrestling shows. And I mostly agree with it, you know. And that's basically that these shows are just commercials for the pay-per-views and stuff like this. But that's how wrestling has been for a long time now. Wrestling only the television shows only mattered because they were trying to get you to go to the house show or go to the pay-per-view. And now people are, they fewer house shows for WWE, more pay-per-views. And now they're just commercials for the pay-per-view. So now you really get the big matches on pay-per-view. You really don't get them on TV. Um, but that's because there's not that much competition on anymore. Remember back when Dynamite and NXT was on television, they used to say, well, NXT is trying to have a takeover every week. Well, they was in competition, so they were burning through matches, and it ended up not really helping them in the long term. Gozu94 loves 100 Bullets. I love what I've read so far of 100 Bullets. This is the second volume of 100 Bullets that I have because I found a cheap set of like the first story, I think. I forget what it's called, but I loved it. I thought it had an absolutely fantastic premise where you got this guy who gives you the opportunity to do whatever you want with no repercussions. What are you going to do? And I was like, oh, that's a good premise. That's a great premise. And Brian Azzarello is a pretty good writer too, especially when it comes to like crime stories. And that's like that's my bag, baby. As much as yes, I do like superheroes. I have a lot of superhero stuff. I'm really far more into crime and drama and thrillers and stuff like that. Which is why I like the Dick Tracy comic. I forgot to tell you guys. Dick Tracy, believe it or not. I like the movie, and the movie's a little silly. It's very cartoonish. But this comic that he just released shows people getting shot down, like really like butchered, you know? And Dick Tracy, of course, is investigating. So it's fun, it's violent. It seems to be an appropriate story for Dick Tracy. Got Flat Top in it. Flat Top, I think, is the precursor to Hammerhead, and I always get those characters mixed up. If I remember, Hammerhead is a villain, a Daredevil villain, if I remember correctly. Also a Spider-Man villain, if I remember correctly. Now, he's a guy with the big flat top head, and he's a gangster, and like a generic gangster. He has like a weird shaped head. So I like the Dick Tracy stuff. This has been good. I've been trying to find more crime books to read outside of just getting um mm, something in my nose. Outside of basically Criminal and Kill or Be Killed and Ed Brubaker stuff. I've been trying to find other people who write crime shit, and Brian Azzarello is really good at that stuff too. And this is what actually keeps you into like Batman and stuff like that. Is it's when Batman is done right, it's a good crime drama. WG Phil wants to know how it's going. It's going okay. Not perfect, but not bad enough where anybody will feel sorry for me. Black Saiyan 97 says, speaking of Marvel, you ever watched X-Men Evolution? I have. I didn't like it as much as I liked the other X-Men cartoon, the X-Men animated series. X-Men Evolution was okay though. I felt like it was abbreviated. I think it got canceled. Or I might be confusing X-Men Evolution with Wolverine and the X-Men because I have Wolverine and the X-Men on DVD, so I might be having those two shows mixed up. Never mind. Have I ever tried reading The Walking Dead? The comic is better than the show. You know what? I have not. I read the first volume online, and I I see why it was good because they set up that Rick Grimes love triangle. Oh, it's very well done in the first few issues. But much like in the show, once Shane is taken out of the series, it's kind of like, But I haven't read it. To be fair, It's a really long series, and I haven't read even a quarter of it. It's the same thing with Invincible, but where Invincible is more of an issue of I don't really like the art style. I know a lot of people like the Ryan Otley art. It's not really my thing. Uh, but I've been teetering on reading Invincible. I've had an opportunity to buy the first, I think, 19 issues for $10, and I didn't take it. Uh, I just, there's something about the series that feels flat for me, and I just haven't felt like the need to read it. It doesn't feel like I'm missing anything. And I know it's very popular right now. As a matter of fact, I haven't watched the most recent season of the cartoon yet. So maybe I ought to watch the recent season of the cartoon. I haven't watched that yet. Timu says, I got through Walking Dead spinoffs, which haven't been anything special, but still way more engaging than WWE or AEW, although not very engaging at all. I don't know. Are you watching the TV shows or the spinoff comics? I didn't know they had spinoff comics though. WG Phil says Derek Luke will be playing Johnny Cochran in the Michael Jackson biopic, and apparently they filmed the Neverland raid for the '90s era. That ought to be interesting. Yeah, Hasbro does stream GI Joe, and you could just pop on over there and watch that whenever you want. I try to watch things in order just in case there might be things that build upon each other from episode to episode. But 80s cartoons typically don't build on each other that much. They seem to be standalone episodes. But I was asked a very interesting question about which product did I like more? Transformers, Thundercats, He-Man, or GI Joe? And I was like, oh my god, that's a tough question because all those shows are older than me. you Most of those shows started when I was a baby, or I was 2 or 3 years old. I know that if I had to make a list, Transformers would be at the bottom because I almost watched almost no Transformers as a kid. After that, I had plenty of GI Joes. Big fan of Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, Destro and the Cobra Commander. I found the GI Joe, the Joes, the heroes, to be pretty generic, but I was fascinated with the villains. I still would put GI Joe third. Second would probably be He-Man. I liked He-Man as a kid. Even though He-Man nowadays is like Sailor Moon for boys, where the sword turns him into, He-Man. I was enamored with He-Man. It fit pro wrestling for me. He-Man was right up there with pro wrestling, where big jack dude doing the right thing. I was on board for that. But number one for me is probably Thundercats, and it's probably because I put Thundercats and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on a different platform. In terms of how I was such a big fan of those franchises. And I've been very disappointed I was very disappointed in the first issue of the new Thundercats comic, to the point where I didn't go back and read the second the second issue. Similar to Gargoyles. I didn't like the first issue, so I didn't go back and read the second. But Thundercats is a tremendous series, really fun. I probably would flip flop and put He-Man number one due to my love of Skeletor as well. But 80s cartoons they're great. 80s and 90s cartoons are great. The only thing is you will get bored because they do not build on each other. You have to really like the franchise and really like the characters because they're not changing that much and the stories are not changing that much from episode to episode. NXT is the only good wrestling show right now. NXT's been the only good wrestling show for like 2 or 3 years. But there's still people who hate NXT. They hate NXT. And they really hate NXT 2.0, man. And if you're gonna hate something, hate it for a good reason. The people who are looking at Cage Match and like, oh, I can't believe it. I was gonna make a video about that, but I deleted it because I was like, I'm saying the same thing over and over again. But one thing that triggered me was I was watching people who did not watch the show, and they were posting cage match ratings for Mandy Rose as a champion. And that was their barometer about whether the show was good or not. Was she was beating Alba Fire, and they were talking about how great Alba Fire was, how great a wrestler she is, and why would they have her lose to Mandy Rose in 10 minutes? I'm like, because Mandy is charismatic, and she can talk, and she's beautiful, and she's over, and people care about her. And nobody gave a rat's ass about Alba Fire or Kaylee Ray or whatever the hell you want to call her. Nobody gave a shit. But I decided not to do that because I feel like I rant about NXT 2.0 way too much, and I don't want to go too over the line about it. And I also don't want to talk about specifically Mandy Rose's championship run. But seeing people who just decide whether something is good or not by reading cage match ratings is some high level dorkery, and I'm just kind of like, wow, they don't get it, and they wouldn't get it. But there was a reason why NXT 2.0 led to the revamped NXT. And there's also a reason why people stopped watching it. Some people say, oh, Triple H saved it by putting all the NXT UK people in it. It's like, do you know the ratings started going up when like Braun Breaker was made the champion? And then things stabilized a little bit with Dragunov and Carmelo Hayes, but there was a lot of fluctuation there. When you had like Gallus on the show and a bunch of NXT UK guys who nobody cared about was being featured. But I'm glad people are at least giving NXT a chance now. Again, NXT exists for a reason, and they just don't want it to exist for that reason. John Cream says, unless you are TNA Impact under Russo or Bischoff, they put zero effort into the pay-per-views because Spike was paying them so much. Well, yes, but I think it's always been a Russo issue that he doesn't care about pay-per-views. So that was one of his things in WCW is he felt like he was being paid for television ratings. He didn't care about attendance, and he didn't care about pay-per-view buys, which goes to show that he didn't care about the product or his stories. It's the dumbest shit in the world. I'm only getting paid for pay-per-view ratings, bro. It's like, but everything that you produce should contain the same stories, right? So you should realize that if attendance is not doing well, that means your stories suck. If your pay-per-views are not being purchased, that means your stories suck. That's pretty much what it boils down to, doesn't it? Like that's common sense, I would think, but not for him, which is sad. Prince Ali says, I'm building a wrestling promotion with just fictional characters. James Bond is the world heavyweight champion and is in a rivalry with John Wick. And most is not all anime characters are in NXT. Holy hell. What is that about? I'm trying to figure out. Okay, I'm pretty sure John Wick could kick the shit out of James Bond, but I've read James Bond novels. He's not like he's far cooler in the movies, I think. He's cool in the novels, but he's cool in the movies too. He's very cool in the movies. But he's not like high level martial arts competent, gun fu John Wick. I only watched the first John Wick though. I didn't watch the other 4 movies. I think there's been. John Cream has been trying to get through Game of Thrones with his dad, and HOTD, uh, hmm, HOTD, House of the Dragon, I guess, right? Um, I'm not, I'm not interested in those shows. Those shows it looks so boring. They look so dreadfully boring. It's just every time I turn to one of those shows, it's just people sitting at a table or something talking. They just walk and talk, and I'm like, oh, it's all this palace intrigue, and I'm like, oh, it's so boring. Like, if you're gonna create a show like that, it should be Star Trek. Star Trek is a lot of people walking around talking, but Star Trek is interesting because it's aliens and it's space and shit. Um, I know like Middle Earth and all that kind of stuff is supposed to be interesting too, because you got trolls and dragons and blah blah blah. But that's just not my thing. You know, I need somebody to get into some really combat-y kind of stuff. And somebody got to fight something. You know, and I know they do have battles and stuff on those shows, but I don't think it's often enough for me. And that's actually what made me lose interest in not I say Game of Thrones, Walking Dead. To double back to Walking Dead was extremely fun to watch when the zombies were a threat. It was incredibly fun, and then it became people sitting around chatting about their personal lives and talking and talking and talking and walking around and talking, and I'm like, oh, and things started to drag out and the pacing got so shitty. And I was like, oh my god. And I have no patience for what they call high fantasy, which is a world that does not exist in our world. That includes like dragons and trolls and shit. Like I have almost no patience for that kind of stuff. I can't read it in a novel. I know that I shouldn't say that because I do like Conan the Barbarian, which is sometimes high fantasy. I love the Conan magazines from the 70s and the 80s. Love the Conan comic books that's coming out right now under Titan. So Conan technically is high fantasy. I love that shit. Um, the Princess of Mars, really like that. Like the Elric of Melibone, like that. So I shouldn't say I hate high fantasy. I should say that um, some of that stuff that has been put out that comes out in like gigantic bricks that they want you to read, and it's extremely dry and written in ye old English. I don't like that shit. I don't like it. so so Game of Thrones, all that kind of stuff. I'm not gonna fall in. But I did like Narnia. You know, the Narnia books. Oh, that shit was good. The C.S. Lewis, that stuff was good. And that actually inspired me to write. Wolverine and the X-Men got canceled after the merger. Yeah, that explains why the ending was so abrupt. Black Dan 97 says, I'm actually really a comic called The Darkness. It's about a mafia hitman who is possessed by an ancient entity. It had a video game which was really good. What's his name? Jackie Esposito? Yeah, I've read the sister series called The Witchblade. And The Darkness actually comes from The Witchblade. It's a similar concept. Sarah Pazzini is a police officer who her partner is murdered by Jeremy Irons, who is a what would you call it? He's sort of a collector, and he wants to possess the power of the Witchblade. But at the time, he doesn't know that the Witchblade can only be wielded by a woman. So he kind of like almost destroys his hand, putting it in there, and then Sarah ends up getting it, and it's like a symbiote. Where it was a big thing in the '90s, symbiotes. You know, Venom, the Darkness, the Witchblade, Spawn. It's all the same thing. It's body modification and weird stuff that's coming out of your mouth and eyes and shit. All that stuff came out around the same time. Soon as Venom happened and Venom could swing webs and create knives with his hands like Carnage and shit, you started getting Witchblade, you started getting Darkness, you started getting Spawn. And Witchblade was good, but it was cheesecakey. All the women were very shapely, just beautiful knockouts. And of course, the feminists hate that. So they recreated the Witchblade most recently, um, and they have made it for modern audiences, and it's boring as shit. I know they come out with a new Witchblade too, a new Witchblade comic series that's supposed to be Sarah Pazzini again, but not a fan. But Witchblade went on forever. It's a fun series. It just never seemed to have a direction, and that's typical of comics in the '90s. You create a character, and then you just keep putting that character in weird situations. Like Sarah's character was at first she would sometimes deal with occult issues, sometimes it's regular police work, and it had like her personal life mixed into it and all this kind of stuff. And it was fun. I have several volumes of Witchblade, and it's fun. I have a couple of issues of Darkness. I don't have like a, a a graphic novel, which is what I want to get. But yeah, Jackie is a young hitman. He's introduced in the Witchblade as being the guy who wields the darkness, which is the brother power set to the Witchblade. WG Phil says Invincible seems the Garth Ennis try hard deconstruction. Yeah, and that's why I'm not. That's part of why I'm not interested. And I know that most people have said that it's not true and that it's not a try hard deconstruction, and that Mark is a very interesting character. Um, I've seen him much like a Gohan type of character, where he doesn't really. He kind of wants to be a superhero, but it's very hard. He has to learn how to do it. And I'm like, okay, I can see that, but the excessive amount of guts ripping, eyeballs popping, I'm just like, okay, let's chill. But maybe I'll get back into it. I mean, the series is becoming so out there that I'm starting to see more and more of it, and I'm just kind of like, shrug. But it was like that with Black Hammer too, and I'm surprised Black Hammer isn't. They making cartoons and stuff out of that too, because Black Hammer for a while was really big, and I haven't read that either. But I'm actually more interested in Black Hammer. Timu says the Walking Dead TV show had the spinoffs. The TV show I thought was an average, all right, sometimes good, sometimes extremely boring, very up and down. I liked it to watch the whole main show. Interesting. Yeah, I think after the barn, the TV show hit a skid and never really pulled up. I would check back in every once in a while to see if it was any good, and it would just be people talking, talking, talking. And what did it for me was the Negan reveal, because I was very excited for this, because I heard about it. I wasn't reading the comics, but people were telling me like, "Oh, is the series going to pick back up once they get to Negan?" And then they finally did. And then I was like, "That's it? Is that it? No, no. Oh no, this sucks." And I never went back. It's been it for me. Black saying 97 says I should check out the 2003 TMNT show, best TMNT media of all time. Okay. Anti-smarts are Prince Ali says anti-smarts are just as hyperbolic as smarts are. Cody Rhodes is boring right now, but that doesn't mean criticize everything about the man. Someone said the Crossroads wasn't a credible finisher. Oh, it beat Roman Reigns, so it's credible. People believed it when it happened too, so it's believable. I remember when John Cena lost to the Busai Kuni by Daniel Bryan. I looked at that and I was like, "Are you fucking serious?" Because I think it was like the first person ever to lose to that move, and I was like, "What? What? It's not like an established move either." I was like, "This is the shit." I was pissed because Cena is Superman. You could do whatever you want to him, and he seems to kick out. But here you get a hit with a running knee strike, and that was it. I was like, "Oh hell no!" But ended up really establishing Bryan Danielson's finisher. But I don't know what it is about Cody that people hate. He's very traditional, so maybe that's it. Triple H's booking is extremely boring, though. There's just no excitement to this thing. There's no threat of danger. There's no Cody hasn't even been laid out yet. He hasn't been beaten up by anybody. Nobody's posed a threat. Cody is still in the shaking hand stage and talking tough and all this kind of stuff, which is good. It's fine, but you know, it's it's lacking in heat. It's lacking in substance. It's lacking in passion. It's lacking in fire. Cody being a bit boring is just the problem with wrestling as a storytelling format. A movie, comic, whatever would have just hit the credits after Cody won the title, but wrestling must continue. You know what? That's a really good point. And that's one of the issues that we always had with the concept of finishing the story is once the story is finished, now what? You know? And a lot of smart people had that sort of mentality that, okay, you finished the story, Cody, now what? And everybody knew that now what is basically you start telling somebody else's story. Cody is the man now. Now you have to move on and do something with somebody else. And they didn't have anybody else ready, and they didn't introduce anybody else. All I would have done is set it up for Cody and Brian Breaker. Not immediately for them to wrestle at Backlash, but maybe had them have a, some. I know they put them on separate brands now, but maybe had a backstage thing. Or do you remember when CM Punk had, met Booker T backstage at like ECW, and they just talked, and then CM Punk was like, maybe one day you and I, he knocked on the world title, like maybe you and I will meet for that. And Booker T looked at him like, what the hell's wrong with this kid? Like that was good foreshadowing. Like they never did it, but it was good foreshadowing, and it let you know that Punk is somebody that you can be looking at into the future as a guy who might be a replacement for Booker T. And CM Punk did win the title, I think the next year or the year after or something, but it wasn't against Booker T. But you could have did something similar with Cody and Brian Breaker. Cody says, this is the title my dad never won. And Brian Breaker can say the same damn thing. Like my family never had a world championship either. Well, that's not true because Scott Steiner won the world title. You could say, well, my uncle never won that title. My dad never won that title. What makes me so much different from you? And tell them that, you say wrestling has more than one royal family. Well, it has more than two. So you can go exactly the same way and just tell the story of Brian Breaker going to be the guy that's going to chase Cody Rhodes down. And he's young, and have him tearing through guys on a different brand, and tell the stories that people will believe that maybe Brian might win the Royal Rumble. Maybe Brian will win Elimination Chamber and be the guy that's wrestling Cody at WrestleMania next year. For the Steiners versus the Rhodes. That could be fun. But they didn't go that route either. So the story doesn't have to end, but you have to have something that within that body of that story leads to the next chapter. That's why you have sequels. Sequels and different things like that are to continue the story, but you got to have elements and things that continue it. What Triple H is doing is basically giving Cody a month and a half off before he starts any heat, because AJ Styles, everybody loves him, but forget it. And then you've got Logan Paul. Nobody believes Logan Paul is going to win that match. So, I mean, I can't buy Logan Paul beating Cody right now, unless something happens where somebody helps him win. Timu says even when the story is over, this is also why you want to prolong things like Cody winning the title. Well, they did. They prolonged it for a year. I don't know if they could have done it another year. I just don't think they could have gotten away with that. But they should have just been more prepared for when Cody won the title. Austin worked so well because winning the title wasn't an obstacle. It was Mr. McMahon. And that obstacle was ever present. So Austin always had that obstacle. That is correct. In this instance, however, the obstacle could have been the bloodline. And you could have built up to Cody fighting or defending the title against Solo Sikoa. You still could have had your match with AJ Styles. You still could have had your match with Logan Paul, but you still could have had Solo Sikoa as the guy who was up next. It's similar to Braun Breaker, where he could have just been like, well, or to be quite honest, much more like when Triple H took over DX, like Roman, like they kind of did it with SmackDown, where you had Solo basically says he's in control until Roman comes back, and he's bringing in new members. You could have done that same thing, because that's what Triple H did. When he recreated DX, he brought in X-Pac, and he brought in the New Age Outlaws, who were not members when Shawn Michaels was there. The New Age Outlaws were affiliates of DX when Shawn was there. They became full members when Triple H was there. In this instance, you could do the exact same thing. have Solo cut Roman down, say he let the bloodline down. He dropped the title, he dropped the ball. He's taken over. He's the tribal chief, the tribal heir or whatever, and he's going to do things his way, and he's going to bring in his own guys, and they're going to handle this. And they're going to handle it. And the first thing they're going to do is take care of Cody. And then you could put obstacles in their way so that Cody can breathe and do other things. But that threat should have been created almost immediately to let you know that this is what we're doing. This is where we're going with. When we have breathing room, when there's more time in between events, this is where we're going. We're going to go back to Cody versus the Bloodline, but this time it's going to be Solo Sikoa, or it might be Tama Tonga, or it might be Tongaloa, and you could even have him defend the title against them on TV if you don't think that they're great pay-per-view threats. But there's different ways of you doing this. But now everybody seems to be aloof, in a weird space. So I don't know what that's about. Loki07 says he watched the first season of Game of Thrones, didn't give a shit, and loved Lord of the Rings. Stopped watching Walking Dead after season 4. Yeah, I don't have no idea what season 4 of Walking Dead was. John Cream says a fan of medieval and Middle Ages history, so he likes Game of Thrones and his fictional world with fantasy. And with enough of the medieval aspects that interested him at first. Well, that's excellent. Maybe because I don't find the Middle Ages and all that stuff all that interesting. Like I did like Braveheart, but I've never been like a Robin Hood guy. There's never been like an era of time that I thought was extremely interesting. Even though I did like Highlander when they used to do the Middle Ages stuff. That stuff used to be decent. Mark W says Witchblade is a spank bank book by design. I mean, it wasn't that bad. Compared to some of the manga and stuff that people are reading nowadays, it doesn't even rate. It's just basically tight dresses, very slender women in tight dresses with big boobs. That's really it. But yeah, it wasn't like super pornographic or like tits or anything like that where you could see areolas. She was scantily clad, but it was clearly like a bodysuit. I guess you could say it was a lot like what am I thinking of? Red Sonja. Yeah, kind of like Red Sonja. Symbiotes and clones is basically 90s Spider-Man comics sums up. Yeah, and there was a lot of copycatting. People who wanted to have their own kind of symbiote kind of character. I believe it was Michael Turner or that created Witchblade. Oof, I hope I'm not lying on that guy. But basically what they did with Venom, people wanted to recreate that, and so they came up with all these and Witchblade ended up being an incredibly popular series. It had a cartoon. The comic series actually ran for a really, really long time. A couple of spinoffs, of Darkness being one of them. There was other ancient weapons that were introduced. I think the Magdalene was another one. I haven't read that much of it, but there was a couple of spinoff books, and it was a really deep franchise that they just kind of let wither on the vine, and then they killed it with feminism. Now they're trying to bring it back again, so forget it. Top Cow has been memory holes. It's crazy. They were huge when I got into comics as a kid. Yeah, a lot of indie comics was a big deal, you know. But a lot of those indie comics kind of fell off a cliff. A lot of that stuff is because it was in the 90s, and a lot of it was, I guess you could say, vapid. It was big guns, lots of pockets, just basic boots and stuff. Rip-offs of G.I. Joe or rip-offs of Spider-Man or Venom or, rip-offs of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or whatever, just overpopulating the indie scene. But there was also some really good stuff. I think Witchblade was one of the good ones. I liked Witchblade. I started reading Witchblade with the floppies, and then I stepped up and got a couple of the graphic novels, like the origin books. and those were pretty good. I still got them. I still got those. I don't have the floppies anymore though. Mark W says old school Savage Dragon was a great superhero at one point. Yeah, how it became a porn book, I just have no earthly idea. But I've heard good things about Savage Dragon. I've never read it myself though. Prince Ali says Sailor Scouts, Izuku, Bakugo, Shoto, Naruto, Yono, Rebecca Lee, blah 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 blah. All are all in NXT. Oh, okay. Light Yagami as a GM and the Bebop crew commentary. Oh my goodness. I can't imagine Spike has too much to say. Did I ever see the Blade anime? Absolutely. The Blade anime was tremendous. I actually was not I didn't hate the X-Men anime either. I got both of those on DVD. Iron Man, can't vouch for that. But Blade was excellent. Blade was really good. Blade is almost always so much better in other media. Like I got a lot of Blade comics, like the original Blade run is pretty good. The black and white Blade from Gene Colan and Glenn Wein. No, Len Wein and Gene Colan. What did I say? That stuff is really good. It's in black and white. I think it was a Tomb of Dracula stuff. That stuff's tremendous. It's really good. 90s Blade it's a weird thing because he's not a vampire in some of that stuff, like in the early parts of Midnight Suns, he's not a vampire. He's a vampire hunter, but he's not a vampire. And then he's a vampire in certain parts of the 90s series. But the comics never captured Blade as well as the movies and that anime did. That anime was great. And of course the movies were fantastic. But they have always failed to make him cool in the comics. I just don't know why that is. He's cool in the early series though. In the early part of the Tomb of Dracula series and a couple of the early Blade books, he's good. But then I think the 90s is much like Ghost Rider, I think, where there was an era of people loved Ghost Rider, but they mostly loved the idea of Ghost Rider because people don't talk that much about the stories that involve Ghost Rider. You know, sad. But Blade is like one of those characters where he looks cool, he sounds cool if you tell somebody about him, but you can't point a story to somebody and say this is what tells you what Blade is all about. You should read this. But I do suggest if you can find the Blade black and white that you get that and read that. That's good. Cody winning shows no one will be happy. Well, it is what it is. It is what it is. What can you say? People hate the babyface once he's gone over, and they think that okay, he's had his turn, and now it's somebody else's turn. That's just kind of how people think. And, it's unfortunate. Oh shit, I lost my part. Where am I? Okay, here it is. Robin Hood is toxic, glorifying of communism. It ruined generations of humans. Well, Robin Hood is not a communist, though. Robin Hood steals from the rich to give to the poor, but he really was supposed to steal from like the corrupt officials, you know, because the idea behind Robin Hood is that he is a vigilante who realizes that the people of Sherwood Forest are being overtaxed, and he takes the money back and gives it back to them. So he technically is not a communist because he doesn't work for the government. In fact, he's against the government. But the Robin Hood concept has been co-opted by leftists as a you rob the rich. But it's like, well, what if the rich people earn the money? The point is that the tyrants didn't earn the money, and they were taking it from the people, and the people deserved it back. It was about Robin Hood was a man of justice. These people deserved to have their money returned to them, as opposed to these people spent their money on their own, and then Robin Hood just stole it from them and gave it back to them. That's not justice. But that will require morality, which people don't have anymore. You know. So it is what it is. Who am I going to add to that NXT anime roster? Hmm, hmm. I'm trying to think of like a something kind of young. I guess I think you've already got the My Hero characters in there, so I would think that NXT would be for like young talent, young guys who are trying to get over. Well, they're Japanese. I don't. Well, they are technically are anime characters because there has been Street Fighter anime movies. Did I ever watch the Witchblade live action show from 2000? I tried. I've been searching online for it. I can't find it anywhere. Mark W. missed late '90s wrestling, which Heyman didn't always intend to sell out. I'd say ECW is my favorite Fed, but McMahon and crew want to piss on its legacy. I want AEW to succeed, but they can't compete. I don't think Heyman wanted to sell out. I think he just realized that what he wanted to do wasn't going to work. And I think he did the smart decision. Like I know people don't really rock with Paul like that, but I think Paul realized because it's true, they were in over their heads. They spent too much money. Um, and he was like, let's make some decisions where we can keep the lights on and borrowing money from Vince and all this kind of stuff. It's all about keeping the lights on. But then he just, he lost so much talent and everything started going belly up for him. And then he lost the TV network and he was just kind of like, forget it. At that point, I think his heart was broken and he was out of it. He got a taste of corporate America and didn't want to do anything more with it. Ole Anderson wrote a book, Inside Out, about Georgia Championship Wrestling. And it told a really great story about corporations killing the business. I think somebody should write a book with Paul Heyman. Somebody who is interested in the truth should write a book with Paul Heyman and fill it with articles and things like that that support what Paul Heyman is saying. Because there's a lot of stories, and if you get it from Paul, it's probably a lie, or it's probably a half truth, or whatever. It's like nobody knows that Acclaimed Entertainment owned a part of ECW because ECW could not afford the video game, so they had to give him a piece of the company. And Vince owned a piece of the company, and there was a bunch of wrestlers who were owed a lot of money. And like there's so much stuff that would be extremely interesting to get into. But as far as I know, nobody has ever done like a deep dive into ECW and read like a definitive story, like what Guy Evans did with Nitro. Somebody needs to do that with ECW, including all of the stuff Todd Gordon was talking about, including the Joel Goodhart stuff, because Joe Goodhart is an important element to ECW. Even though he didn't work there, he was the precursor. He is the guy who laid the paved the road that they ended up filling with concrete. All that kind of stuff needs to be told like in a definitive fashion with citations and interviews and all that stuff. All that stuff needs to be done instead of people trying to piece together shoot interviews. And I know most of the time when people say somebody should, they just say, well, why don't you do it? It's like, oh, I'm not about to do that shit, man. You think I'm about to quit my job and dedicate like the next 3 years of my life to listening to shoot interviews and digging through newspaper clippings on ECW? And then just for Paul to not talking to me about it? Yeah, hell no. That's a pain in the ass. Yeah, Robin Hood existed well before communism, but sometimes ideas exist, you just don't have a name for it. Like capitalism is very old. But it's just didn't have a name. The barter system, it could be is basically a form of capitalism. It's free trade, free markets. But we like trying to distill things down to one word. Low-key doesn't trust Disney to do Blade. I don't either. I don't trust Disney to do anything right. Disney is obsessed with fucking up easy money. I mean, look at what they're doing with the Fantastic Four. Should have been easy money, but it's silly shit like we got to have a female Silver Surfer. It's like, okay, well, that's it. You're fucking it up right out of the gate. So nobody's going to give it a chance now because you feel like you have to do this for reasons that are not stated and do not make sense. Well, diversity and inclusion, like that's not what people want. People are not asking for diversity and inclusion in Fantastic Four. People want Fantastic Four. They don't give a fuck about your diversity and inclusion. Loki says, thank you for explaining Robin Hood. When I heard the comparison to communism, my brain almost exploded. It was a story about fighting corrupt monarchies that were financially draining the populace. Absolutely. That info about Acclaim is crazy. Thanks for the info. Yeah. Um, it was exposed in the bankruptcy lawsuit that Paul had to give a piece of the company to Acclaimed because he couldn't afford the video game. When the company went out of business, I believe Acclaim sued them. Uh, I'm pretty sure Vince paid him off to go away because he ended up having to. I don't know if he paid everybody. He ended up having to pay a lot of that debt for these people to go away. And Vince was like the second most. Acclaim was number one for sure in terms of how much money they owed, but I think Vince was second. So, and then Acclaim went out of business too shortly after. So it wasn't like they were around forever, but I think Acclaim went under maybe 2 years after ECW closed, maybe 3. It was around that same time Acclaim went under, and Vince gave them like chump change or whatever to go away. But yeah, Paul was doing stupid shit, and when you read what Paul was doing, you're like, yeah, this company went out of business. They were spending tons of money to be on local television in Florida, and took forever to get the show down there. Like the Sunshine Network, I think they may have even owed them some money. It was insane. The bankruptcy thing was crazy. It was really crazy. Um, he wants to make an NWO faction, turn Izuku heel. Well, why would you do that? He's such a natural babyface. AEW shouldn't be shocked their boys aren't getting over. They're all dorks. Yeah. Road Rage, Billy Gunn, and his kids are decent though. The thing is, when Billy Gunn is in the ring and he's massive and he's like a giant wall of muscle and he's 60 some odd years old, and Jay White is in the prime of his life, guy's barely 30, and he looks great, but he's taking all these crazy bumps for Billy Gunn and barely winning. People are like, eh. And then these guys are not cool. You're right. I mean, cool is hard to do. Cool is hard to do. Jay White can talk, but I don't think he's mastered cool. He's not quite on that level. He's good though. He's a good promo. Yeah, Robin Hood exactly is taxation and theft personified. Is absolutely. Especially when you talk about monarchies. So, I mean, people have to remember like Robin Hood and Zorro and stuff like that was very specific when it comes to the villains that they combated. But our liberal worldview have taken those things and twisted them. So now, Zorro was fighting colonizers. It's like, okay, whatever. Yeah, whatever. Turok, Acclaim Comics, total trash. Oh yeah, they lost a ton of money on Valiant. Oh, they lost hella money on Valiant. The game, Turok, the games though was fun. The Turok games was fun. The comics, not so much. The Shadow Man comics, not so much. But they lost a ton of money on Valiant. Oh boy, they shouldn't have though. They could have made a lot of money off the video games. They should have made a Bloodshot video game. Imagine if Bloodshot would have gotten a video game in like 2000, and or maybe a little bit earlier than that, because you had like Duke Nukem and stuff like that, where Bloodshot would have fit in perfectly into that milieu. I think did correct me if I'm wrong. No, that was ADOS. I was about to say, didn't they have Tomb Raider as well? Because I remember Tomb Raider doing crossovers and stuff. But I think that was with Top Cow, I believe. But and IDOS owned Tomb Raider anyway, so I was wrong. Jay White needs more Randy Orton 2000 heel vibes, 2009 heel vibes to get him over entirely. The dude just breeds being a psychopath just by his looks. Yeah, he also needs to talk a little bit slower. You know, he's very confident. He should talk a little bit slower so people can really absorb what he's saying. So he's just firing off like catchphrases and stuff. I don't know about that. Mark W says Danhausen is everything I hate about modern wrestlers. Seems like a decent human being. I just feel cooler than the guys in the ring. Danhausen is a dork, and that's really what it boils down to. It's interesting look. You see him, you think he's a vampire or something. This is what I thought. I was like, oh, this guy's like a vampire gimmick, like an old school vampire gimmick. And then he's got like teeth, and you're like, oh, he's wacky. Oh, well, the kids will like it. You know, like that's basically my first thought. Like if Danhausen was in WWE, the kids would paint their face like Danhausen. You know, very nice, very evil. It'll be fun. He'll get over with the kids, but the adults are going to roll their eyes at Danhausen. Like this guy's a fucking nut. MJF has got a busted up shoulder and hip. He ain't going nowhere no time soon. People forget Vin Diesel was Bloodshot. Oh, you should, because Vin Diesel sucks. And they made the movie too late. They made that movie in like what 2009 or something, 2020. They should have made that movie in like 2002. You know, like Bloodshot is such an interesting character too, where I got a couple of Bloodshot, the Jeff Lemire Bloodshot. I like that stuff. That stuff was good. But the character is an interesting one. It's much like Wolverine. Again, it's very reminiscent of other characters that already exist. And it's like the Wolverine meets the Punisher. You should have done that in the 2000s, right around the time Terminator was becoming a thing. You know, because he's a cyborg, but not really, because it's nano machines or something like that. But you know, it would have fit perfectly up there with like Terminator and Universal Soldier and all that kind of stuff. It would have fit perfectly. You can't do it today. You know, Bloodshot is too masculine of a character. They're not going to put the time and effort and energy behind it. The same reason why, you know, Judge Dredd is not working, even though the most recent Dredd movie was very good. And I didn't hate the Stallone Dredd movie either. But I don't expect them to do Dredd any positives in our modern world. It's going to be shit because everybody's going to think that Judge Dredd is a fascist, even though that technically he is. But Bloodshot could certainly have been bigger than he ended up being. He planning to turn Izuku heel. Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy talk right there. Acclaim did Legends of Wrestling games. Well, they were okay. If I remember the Legends of Wrestling games, that was all the wrestlers who were not signed to WWE at the time. So there was like a bunch of like Hulk Hogan, a bunch of people that was in that game. It was okay, if I remember correctly. If I remember in the right game, it was okay. I don't think it was like fantastic. You know, you absolutely must read it. Yeah, Bloodshot definitely needed to happen in like 2002 or something. Like it's definitely should have happened much sooner. I don't know what took them so long. Shadow Man, great series, good story. Shadow Man can work today. Why they can't get a TV show or something for Shadow Man, I don't know. Turok, Dinosaur Hunter, could have kicked fucking ass. Around the same time they're doing what's the name? Jurassic Park movies. Oh my god. An Indian running around with like a magic. magic axe, killing fucking dinosaurs. It was fucking cool. Especially around the time Dino Crisis video game was out. I love Dino Crisis, the video game series. I only played the first two. Fucking amazing. But Turok, incredible. Uh, I can't believe, like Valiant, you got to be working hard to lose money because the characters are interesting. The Eternal Warrior, very interesting character. He's a guardian of. Let me make sure I'm correct here. The Eternal Warrior is a guy who basically lives forever. It's a play off of the Michael Moorcock concept of Eternal Warrior, except for there is like and it changes, of course, because they reboot the shit every few years. But the Eternal Warriors that I read, there was like a home, like a heaven like place where his family is, and he could still leave and become somebody else in a different time. And it was, I don't want to say it was like Assassin's Creed, but it was kind of like Assassin's Creed. Kind of. Kind of. Mark W says, out of all the X-Men ripoffs, Wildcats sort of just holds up. Joe Casey run and the Jim Lee issues too. Not literature, but decent world building compared to other large Image cohorts. I never really got into Wildcat. I did like Grifter though. I thought he was an interesting character, interesting looking character at that. But I never really just jumped in. It just came across as, I don't know. And then they did the most recent thing that they did. I forget what it was called, but it had like the black guy and all that kind of stuff in it. It was okay, and it wasn't terrible. But it seems to me like they're trying to reinvent the wheel, where in the '90s it was all about cool aesthetics, and these characters look cool, and they have big guns, and they have lots of pockets, and they shoot stuff, and they blow shit up, and people was like, "Oh, that's nice," but there was no substance to it. Now they're trying to add a lot of substance to these things, and they're finding out that it's hard to do. It's hard to do. Um, yeah, Dino Crisis fucking ruled. Oh my god, what a fun series, man! Shit, how they haven't remade those games or made a movie or a TV show out of those games, I have no idea. Capcom is idiots for not trying to do Dino Crisis. I mean, sheesh, sheesh. Barry Windsor Smith has some decent Valiant stuff. Oh, tell me about it. I want to know about it. What's up with that? Good clarification on Robin Hood. My message was erroneous. I should have said Robin Hood's co-opted. But yeah, it's a lot of there's a lot of that kind of stuff that floats around, man. You know, you have to you got to be careful when it comes to these old stories because old shit, man, it starts getting put through these modern lenses, and you end up with something completely different than what it was intended to be. You know. So like I've heard people say, "Oh, a Princess of Mars is a colonizer coming." I'm like, "Oh, get the fuck out of here! Get out of here with this colonizer shit." Okay, he didn't build a colony on Mars anyway. He came to live amongst the Martians because he wanted to live with his woman. God damn, Rune or whatever that vampire was. Well, I think you could tone Gone and Killua heal. They're more heelish than Midoriya. Gone literally threw away his own future just for a fight. He'd probably get away with that. Turok could definitely work today. There's plenty of like Native Americans and Polynesians and stuff who would probably do Turok. You know, again, how can you not, when you have Netflix and Hulu and all these properties, how could you not get this show working? Like the guy fights dinosaurs. I mean, like, what more is there to discuss? But Turok is mostly like a time traveling he's a time traveling Indian, quantum leap, but Indian guy. You know, just do that. Or that could be fun because the most recent comic series I think was him fighting uh, guys, and they were going back and forth through time and all that kind of shit. I think it got cut short, but there's a lot of stuff you could do to make it interesting that they just said. Mark W. said, I think at this point we're all old heads. The superhero pop comic multimedia thing I think is over. In my opinion, movies are a dead medium. Younger Zoomers and alphas don't seem to like movies. I think they have short attention spans because of YouTube and TikTok and all that. Asking them to sit still and watch a hour and a half movie is a bit much. To go an hour and a half without looking at your phone, to go an hour and a half without ping, 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 or Instagramming or whatever, it's a bit much. I do think that they like movies though, because they go to the movies. They still go on dates and shit. It's all about they make whack movies, so people don't talk about them as much. If people made good movies, I think you would see more people talking about them, and people will go to the movies more. But I think that there's not a lot of people who like the movie. I think if you was to tell like a random dude, "Hey, I'm gonna make a movie about a guy fighting dinosaurs with an axe," would you watch that? He'd probably be like, "Fuck yeah!" I get to see a guy fight dinosaur like he's an Indian. So you get the diversity quota, and he fights dinosaurs with like an axe and shit. Like fuck yeah, I want to watch an Indian fight velociraptors. Hell yeah, like I want to see that. It's the rest of the story. Okay, we'll figure that part out. But I got the pitch. The pitch is Indian dude fights dinosaurs. Fuck yeah, black dude who has a magic amulet who allows him to be a medium for a lower spirit that takes over his body, and he fights crime with it. That fucking rules. You know, you don't even got to pitch it as a superhero story. You could pitch it as a goddamn like an occult kind of thing, like a American horror story kind of thing. You know, where it's actually like a superhero joint because it's Shadow Man. That's all. Last slam dunk thing Mark W saw was True Detective. I thought a lot of people like the first season of True Detective. I haven't watched it yet. I want to watch it eventually. But I liked Reacher. I thought Reacher was pretty good. I liked Tulsa King. I thought that was pretty good too. Um, but you said slam dunk, and I could see how people might not like Reacher. I watched the first season of Reacher. I haven't watched the second. I understand how people might not like Tulsa King. So I see how you could not like those things. No, the woke shit ain't going nowhere. It ain't going nowhere because it's baked into the system. So it ain't going nowhere. Hate to be the bearer of bad news. If you think woke shit is going somewhere, you're incorrect. You are incorrect. It ain't going nowhere. At the most, they may try to hide it more. I think that the fact that I look at it as like a W that the X-Men series that everybody is so happy about nowadays hasn't gone full woke bullshit. That's a W for the culture, but it is what it is. I still haven't watched that fucking shit either. I'm gonna watch it when it's over. Um, I'm gonna go back and watch it. WG Phil says people who want representation don't want new stuff. They want to pervert old stories made by the Zionists. Holy hell. Ooh, that's true though. They don't want anything that's already been created that they might enjoy. They want to take over things and pervert them. And that's truly sad because There are so many cool things you could do with characters that exist that people forgot about, like a Turok, like a Shadow Man, and you drop the ball because you know, as far as I'm concerned, man, a lot of people. I have my conspiracy theory. I'm going to close on this because we're not going to be here forever. I think a lot of this diversity shit is a way of monopolizing media. You prevent other people from doing things by having Disney do it. You know, so Disney has to have a certain number of Hispanic superheroes. So what that does, if somebody is, let's say there's a little Hispanic boy in Mexico right now writing a Hispanic superhero, people are going to be like, "Oh, that's nice and all, but we already got Hispanic superheroes. They're all made by Marvel, and we got all these Hispanic superheroes Marvel created, so we don't need yours." And so this guy's like, "Oh well, you know, sucks for me, I guess, but it's a way, in my opinion, of cutting off people from doing things themselves." For instance, Milestone was created by people who were black who felt like they didn't have enough black superheroes. So now there's an abundance of black superheroes and white superheroes being turned black. So do we really need Static Shock or anybody else from that universe if we're just gonna turn white superheroes black? You know, no. And to me, that's a very damaging aspect. It's a way of you don't get to muscle in and do anything different because we're going to have a Spider-Man for everybody. And so if anybody wants a black superhero, they got Spider-Man. But Spider-Man is a white superhero, a black superhero, a gay one, a female, and everything in between. They're trying to cut you off, so that you can't come in and do something and compete against them, you know. Mark W says a bunch of uptight white bitches are ruining our. It's not just them. It's not just women. It's also the weak-willed, pussy whipped males. Men running around with nose rings and colored hair, and those guys are the people who are making the decisions, and they're purposefully ruining things because they're against them. They don't like them. They think toxic masculinity and they think all this kind of stuff. And it is what it is. And looking at what they're doing to the constant attacks that Eric July is going under just for trying to create something different, they don't want anything new. They don't want anything new. No new ideas because we can't control that shit. They want stuff that they can control, you know? And that's a weird, weird aspect, but it's true, you know? And I really pay attention to that kind of stuff, even if I don't visibly put my money on it. Like I'm not gonna buy any more Rippaverse comics, but I'm watching people don't want him to succeed. And you don't understand that the idea of it is you don't want him to succeed because what you want is control over the mainstream comic book industry. You don't want to create competition. You want to control the main comic book industry. Well, you're not going to, because Disney is pretty much fail proof. They'll just keep recreating different versions of the fucking Lion King until they reach the black all over again. Like Disney's been losing the money for years. If it was all about losing money, everybody that operates in Disney today would have lost their fucking jobs. They have Star Wars movies that have bombed, and those people have not lost their jobs. That should tell you right there, it ain't about the money. They don't care about the fucking money. They care about the message. They got more money than they could ever spend. They could keep making these bomb movies, these really shitty TV shows. So you should just be black pilled on the products of the media. Don't even pay that shit no attention. Which is why I'm not in a rush to watch this X-Men show. Disney ain't going nowhere. They ain't going out of business. So it's not like if you don't watch this show, Disney's gonna crater. No, I'm not. No, it's not. It's not going anywhere. Okay, it ain't going nowhere. So I'm not in a rush. Disney gonna do what they do, and they gonna fuck you over eventually because that's what they do. Because they don't really care about you. They care about the message. Am I familiar with Berserk? Yeah. I watched the movies that was on Netflix. But that was all I seen of Berserk. I know a lot about it, but Berserk is one of those things that I see a lot of panels and stuff out of context, but I haven't read it myself. And now I probably will never read it because the shit has no ending. So Raven and Death of the Endless. Hmm. I would imagine that's from Sandman, right? I haven't read. I hate Neil Gaiman. Mark W says I see some many youngsters wearing Berserk merch. It's this generation's Conan. Hmm. That's an interesting. That's an interesting observation. That's a really interesting observation. You know what? That actually might make me want to read Berserk. Because I was like, look, the story is never ending. I don't want to read it because it's not going to end. But if you put it from that perspective, Conan is still, doing his thing, and his original creator been dead what 50 years, 60 years, some shit, longer than that, maybe 100, so thereabouts. Oh my god, the hijacking is shits, But that's what they say about evil. Evil can't create; it can only destroy. You know, and temptation is out there to let people corrupt things and turn things inside out and fuck shit up. And these companies don't care. They think, oh well, just put something out there to keep the IP in the public space without thinking about whether it's actually going to be good or not, and you end up cratering the IP. And the companies don't believe that you can. They think all these companies, they think, oh well, Spider-Man will always make money. Iron Man will always make money. Star Wars will always make money. Without realizing the reason why Star Wars was around for so long is because people were passing it down to their kids. People had such brand loyalty. They were passing that shit down to their children. They were passing their love of Spider-Man and Thor and all that to their kids. But now people aren't having kids, and people are not passing down their hobbies to their kids either, because they hate the shit now. So they're not going to the movies with their kids to see Thor and Iron Man and that kind of shit no more. Because they're like, this ain't the Thor that I want to, introduce my kids to. And how can you blame them? You know? Okay, maybe I will actually read Berserk. Y'all guys are doing a good job of really selling it for me. WG Phil says, to be fair, the attacks going against July are coming from the comics gay moderate right, especially going to his ancestors' graves, his warehouse in Texas, College Game Award. Yeah, a lot of these guys they don't really want it's basically jealousy of his success. And it's shameful if we're being honest, but what can you do about it? Low key suggests I watch the 97 anime. I guess you mean the Berserk 97 Berserk anime. Is it an OVA? Um, or is it an anime series? You said 20 something episodes. That's about a season or so. Maybe I'll check it out. Yeah. Every time I hear about Berserk, I hear about Guts going through some real shit. All right, time to wrap this thing up. Thanks everybody for stopping by. Y'all gave me some good things to think about. I will consider watching Berserk or reading Berserk. It'd probably be more likely reading than watching. So I'm gonna go look and see if I can find a decently priced Berserk book. And let's see. We're gonna start with volume 1. We'll see. So I'll take a look. You won me over with the modern day Conan because I love me some Conan the Barbarian. All right. Thank you guys for stopping by, man. Tell your moms Happy Mother's Day, and thank you guys for your time.